Welcome to the Flying Octopus podcast, offering a new perspective on Red Wings hockey, as well as all the important news from around the NHL. And now, here are your hosts, Tony Wolak, Devin Little, and Evan Sabrin.
Devin, you and I haven't had the chance to talk about Stadium Series. I mean, we were both there, and I wasn't here for the episode last week at a Red Wings game again. But I'm here now. That was quite the experience. And I know, I guess it's old news. The news cycle's moved on. Red Wings lost the game, which makes it even worse, I guess. But I got to say, for Ohio State, that was a really great event. And I hope we don't get flack for that. But I had a great time. You and I were texting all day, and I wish we got a chance to meet up. But with us and the couple we were with, 3 kids under 3, that was not working out well with the cold and the wind advisory that was going on. But so we ended up ducking into the Panera that was right next to the Fan Fest that was there for the game. And so kids are hungry, they're cranky, they need a snack, and we packed plenty, but they just plowed through it real quick. And I was like, all right, we go order something. And obviously the whole place is packed. So, order cookies and macaroni and cheese and, a whole bunch of things just to appease them. Mm-hmm. But so they all go sit down, and I'm waiting for the food. And there are it's shoulder to shoulder in Panera, and everyone's oh, of course. And so they're bringing out the food one by one. People are coming up, and it doesn't stop. It's just a madhouse in there. And the manager eventually comes up because he's like, excuse me, everyone. I'm sorry to inform you, but we are sold out of the broccoli and cheddar soup. So if you ordered that, please let us know what else we can give you instead of the other soups we have. And when he said that, there was an audible, oh. And I didn't order it, but I was just dying, just hearing around the audible gasp of no more broccoli and cheddar soup. That just made the experience all the better. But I don't know, this is the first time I've been on the podcast since Stadium Series. And I got to say, that was a great time. We all had a great time at the game. Lots of core memories made, all the good stuff. I know we ended up losing in the end, but still once in a lifetime experience when you have a kid who's just kind of learning about hockey. But what was your perspective? And I hope to God that you did not order the broccoli and cheddar soup and had to miss out on it.
I think I might have been the guy who got the last bowl. Sorry. No, I'm just kidding. My experience was a lot of fun. I think a highlight was honestly right before the game, walking up into the stadium. There's this weird tunnel that you kind of walk through if you're coming in from a certain direction. And it's a tunnel. You're closed in, and it's a nice mix of Red Wings fans and Blue Jackets fans all walking in the same direction. And, a few steps into the tunnel, all of a sudden you got dueling chants of "Let's go Red Wings, CBJ, CBJ, let's go Red Wings." Kind of made me think of what happens with the Red Wings when the Red Wings play the Maple Leafs and you have the dueling "Go Leafs, go, let's go Red Wings" chants. That was awesome just to be surrounded by. I felt really good about the energy that was going to be in that game, just hearing that. And then also, obviously the rivalry between Michigan and Ohio State's very well documented. I was kind of wondering just what the crowd dynamic was going to be like. And honestly, I like you said, I have to commend Ohio State, not just for the production, for lack of better words, that they put on, but also just the Blue Jackets fans that I interacted with were really nice. They were super excited to see their team playing an event like this. And how couldn't you be, right? I was obviously a visitor from the state of Michigan, and I felt very welcome, even though I wasn't there to cheer on their team. And I still, to this day, have to kind of laugh that for for one night, you had fans from Michigan wearing the color red, and you had fans from Ohio wearing the color blue. So, it like you said, I've been to one other outdoor game besides this one, but this one was something special. I'm really glad I got to be a part of it. It would have, of course, been a lot more fun if the Red Wings would have sealed the deal and won the game, but hey, they at least made the third period interesting. It was a very fun game to witness, and that was definitely a penalty on the game-winning goal. But we're done and past that, right?
We are. No, it's yeah. But overall, the Navy Federal NHL Stadium Series was fantastic, and hopefully the Red Wings get another outdoor game again, because that was, it was a once in a lifetime thing, but it was, something you hope for again in the future. The Blackhawks have had 1,000 outdoor games too. But I guess like the one highlight for me was like, look, my son's 2.5. He loves flags, all flags, American flags, other flags. He knows, like, I'm Polish. He knows the Polish flag. He knows the Turkish flag for my wife. He knows South Korean flag, the Bosnian Herzegovina one for some reason. And like, he loves flags. And the massive American flag was raised right in front of our section. It was like eye level and right in front of us. And his eyes just got huge when the members of the military, raised the flag. It's like, oh my God. He was like, Dada, again. I'm like, it doesn't work like that. Like, they're about to start the game. He's like, again. I'm like, oh, there are planes flying over. It's just, it was like everything from like the hockey game to the production was just, it was an A+, and it's a lot of credit that we're giving to Ohio, but they just. But enough of that. Enough of giving Ohio its flowers. We'll move on. Time to give the Red Wings their flowers. Finally broke the losing streak, beating the Buffalo Sabres 7-3. And Devin, I gotta say, it was a cathartic release. It was a complete breakthrough of like finally getting the monkey off your back, and like 7 goals, fights, you name it. The Red Wings finally broke through. Like, tell me from your perspective, apart from just the thank God perspective, like what else did you see?
Well, when you've lost 6 games in a row, beginning before the trade deadline and going past it, and you're right in the thick of a playoff chase where every game, every point matters so much, a win like that feels so good because, like I just said, you can't afford to go on long losing streaks. I think that's the type of game where, they're not playing when we're recording tonight, but the next time they play, I have to imagine they're going to have some real jump, because that's a game you feel really good after. That's a game where, let's just start with this. The second line were absolute demons on the ice against the Sabres. They did some damage. Patrick Kane with a 5-point game. That's vintage Patrick Kane. Holy cow. Alex DeBrincat with a 4-point game. Marco Kasper with a 3-point game, including 2 goals. That line was dominant. Insane. And that's kind of what you need to see. It's kind of well established at this point that Dylan Larkin and Lucas Raymond, the main producers on that top line, haven't been producing as much as they were prior to the Four Nations break. Larkin, in this game had 3 assists, so he clearly was putting up points, and Raymond had 2 as well. But it's nice to see. It was nice to see in a stretch where your top guys haven't been getting it done for one reason or another, that the second line steps up and carries this team to a dominant victory. I think that it was also, of course, good to see the team fighting for each other at the end. It is kind of funny that, it was maybe a bit prophetic that Steve Eiserman, in his press availability after the trade deadline, made a point about how he thinks that fighting is going to kind of reemerge in the NHL, whether we like it or not. And then not even a week later, there's basically a line brawl between the Red Wings and the Sabres, right?
Not necessarily a line brawl, but just the full line of the Sabres fighting Simon Evans.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And I guess it's one of those things too, where like I don't know how you don't see your teammates literally fighting for each other and you don't jump in on that. You don't want to be a part of that. Like I guess all of this is to say that yes, they are just coming off of a 6-game losing streak, but if there's one thing we've learned, it's that this team is very streaky throughout this entire season. And this is the type of game that, at least in my opinion, typically starts a winning streak. And boy, could the Red Wings use one right now.
Yeah, and talk about an offensive outburst in that game. Petr Kane had 5 points. That whole line of Kane, Kasper, and DeBrincat had a spectacular game. I feel like whenever they were on the ice, they were, challenging for scoring a goal. Like they had lots of good looks, even if it didn't go in. But Kane with 5 points against his hometown team, and the national TV production team was loving that. But that line was just unstoppable that night. Not to discredit Petr Kane or anything, his 5 points, carried the team, and it was absolutely impressive to see. I want to talk a bit about Marco Kasper a bit, and also Alex DeBrincat, and I'll start with the latter there. But Alex DeBrincat has been on fire lately for the Red Wings, and I don't know if it was like him feeling like he got snubbed from Team USA for the Four Nations face-off, or if it's just him just wanting to make the playoffs and just pushing hard for that. But he has been an absolute driver for this team lately. Had another big game, his 30th goal of the season, where he just cut to the middle and ripped it short side. That was a goal scorer's goal, and I love to see it. Like when he came over from the Senators to the Red Wings, there, you had to wonder, like, well, are his 40 goal days in the past, like, are we looking at like a 25 to 30 goal scorer moving forward? He's been great for the Red Wings this season, and especially as of late. I feel like since the Four Nations break, he has been their best player. And that's it's a lot of praise for Archie's dad, but he fully deserves it, given the players on the team. But we touched on Kane, we touched on DeBrincat, but I do want to give Marco Kasper some credit as well, because he has straight up looked like a second line center for the Red Wings. And last week when I was at the Red Wings Capitals game and missed that episode, I was there, I was sitting in the stands and see, Soderblom out there with Larkin and Raymond for the national anthem and stuff. He's pretty hard to miss. I see him out there. I was like, okay, all right. So this probably means Kasper with Kane and DeBrincat. And, I was watching that game and he comes out for an offensive zone faceoff. I was like, all right, let's see what we can do here. This is a good opportunity for him. Andrew Kopp's out. JT Compher hasn't played super well lately. Let's give Marco Kasper a shot at the 2C role and kind of see how it goes. And, played pretty solid there, played even better against Ottawa, and then had an even better game against Buffalo. And it had me thinking, like, all right, the Red Wings have a second line center here. Like, he looks the part of the role. And Devin, I want to ask you, like, I know you've had more live viewings of Kasper than I have based on his time in Grand Rapids, but is this something you were expecting? Like, how well he's been playing over this whole season, but especially since Todd McLellan has taken over. Were you expecting this for this sort of trajectory for him, or is this even above and beyond what you're expecting?
Well, real quick before I touch on Casper, I just want to throw out there to kind of add to the DeBrincat thing. DeBrincat had a point in every single game the Red Wings played in the month of February. Now, I say that with a little bit of tongue in my cheek because the Four Nations break was right in the middle of February, so they didn't play as many games as they normally play in a month. But that's still about a dozen games. That's pretty impressive. And that just goes to your point of DeBrincat's stuff is happening when he's on the ice, and it's usually good stuff. I for one, I think that the chase for 40 this year is a legitimate thing for him. I don't know that he'll get it. I think he might fall painfully short. But even the fact that we could talk about this and it's not, it's a logical outcome. It could very well happen. That's exciting. That's Red Wings haven't had a 40 goal scorer in a very long time, and to see DeBrincat showing that form is exactly what the Red Wings were hoping for when they traded for him.
This,
Now, moving to Casper.
if I can jump in, this may be like a puck answer, but I feel like Marian Hossa was the last 40 goal scorer for the Red Wings.
I believe you are correct. And
All right.
Marian Hossa has not played for the Red Wings in a long time. On to Casper. So when I think of, or when I watch prospects, when I think about them, when I'm writing my rankings and all that good stuff, I have what I think is kind of a logical outcome for them, for lack of better words, and then I have like an ideal outcome. For example, I I thought Sebastian Cossa, an ideal outcome for him this season was that he was pushing for starts by the end of this season. I don't know that we're going to be there, but that's why it was an ideal outcome, right? Logically, the logical outcome was that he was the bona fide starter in Grand Rapids, got the majority of starts, and leads them on a fruitful playoff run. And so far, we're on track for that. Now, my logical outcome for Marco Casper was that he was going to be a Red Wing this season, and he maybe kind of bounced around the middle six. I thought maybe he'd be the third line center for some time, which he did spend some time there this season. Maybe establishes or furthers his chemistry with Jonatan Berggren that he had with our Grand Rapids. And he got in on some special teams. I think I kind of always thought that his two-way ability would make him a special teams player, both on the power play and the penalty kill. But at the end of the day, I still kind of thought that they would kind of keep the training wheels on him. Well, the ideal outcome was that he would be the team's second line center. And this is proof that the ideal outcome does in fact happen sometimes. Because yes, he does look like a second line center. Marco Casper is one of those players that, I mean, if you look at his stat line from last season, it doesn't really jump out at you. He didn't score or really produce a lot until the second half of this season. And then once we got into that second half, he started to produce and make a difference on a pretty regular basis. Now, where I'm going with that is that he's a player that has gradually gotten better as he's played more and more. And I think that is what we have seen from Marco Casper this season. You know, started the season in Grand Rapids. I know that was a long time ago, but he did not start the season in Detroit. Quickly got the call up, was the third line center with Berggren and Tarasenko. And then he got that promotion to the first line, looked really good with Larkin and Raymond. I was starting to kind of realign what maybe was going to happen there. I thought maybe they were going to start seeing him as more of a winger, but to now see him slide into that second line center position, I think, again, this was the ideal outcome, at least in my opinion. I think that he fits on that line really well. He is not afraid to get into the dirty areas of the ice, do the not so glamorous work so that Patrick Kane and Alex DeBrincat can work their magic together. And for what it's worth, Marco Casper was drafted as a center. This is exactly where they wanted him to be, you know, whether it was this season or next season, whatever. This is where they wanted him to be. This is what they drafted him to be. And the fact that in his first NHL season, he seems to look very comfortable in the second line center position. I mean, you can't help but start to wonder where he might be in a couple years, right? Could he be pushing for that first line center role? I know I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here, but when a player shows the comfort level that Casper has had this season in the NHL, whether it's on the wing or down the middle, you start to kind of just raise the ceiling of what he could be, because he's only going to go up from here.
Yeah, and to that, don't you just love it when your predictions come true, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, play aside, nailed it. Just like I did when I called Petr Mrazek Detroit's goalie of the future. No,
Solid.
it's that was a long time ago, and it came to fruition roundabout way. But we do have Mrazek back. He is a member of the Red Wings once again. Trade deadline acquisition, as you guys covered last week, and had his Red Wings second debut. Is there a term for that? Past game against Buffalo, and he looks solid, and obviously giving up 3 goals is probably more than you want, but for the way things have gone for the Red Wings this season, that was fine. Like, obviously, I would have preferred 2 or less goals, but can't argue with how things turned out. One thing I did feel like he did a great job, though, was when things got a little scrambly in the defensive end, he made the save. Yes, 3 went in, sure, whatever. But he made the timely saves. And it's hard to quantify that, but he made the saves when it mattered most. One example of that, and I believe this was early-ish in the third period, the Red Wings were up by 2 goals, I believe. There was a turnover in the defensive zone. Someone flipped it out into the middle. Sabres intercepted it, walked right down Main Street, and took a shot high glove from probably halfway between the blue line and the goal line. If it was Kim Talbot or Alex Lyon, I'm willing to bet that was going in. But Mrazek just snapped it out of the air with it, with his attitude that he has, and just it was a nothing burger. And so that to me was a moment where I was like, all right, we might have something here. And there is a lot to like for Petr Mrazek's game as it relates to the defense in front of him. One thing that he is very good at that Cam Talbot and Alex Lyon are not as good at is lateral adjustments. He can go from left to right so quickly. He has that quick twitch, muscle, reaction when pucks are darting around in front of him. And that is something that this team needs because they're still a little leaky in the defensive zone. There were, a couple of defensive breakdowns that led to, goals against. Can't fault Mrazek for that, but they at least have a goalie who fights for every puck and has that quick twitch reaction to compensate for defensive shortfalls. For Cam Talbot and for Alex Lyon, that's not their strength. They see it, they'll generally stop it, but their reaction time isn't at the same level as Mrazek. So while I don't think Mrazek is a perfect goalie by any means, I do think his style at least better fits with the defense in front of him. But I do think the Red Wings have some work to do about their in-zone coverage because they did give the Sabres a lot of good looks. Technically, only 6 high-danger chances at 5-on-5, but there were a lot of plays where you would probably want a more clean exit or breakout or just puck recovery and transition it out. But that didn't happen. That's just what the state of the team right now. They're not. There's work to be done. Yzerman, he went after Brandon Carlo, so he knows that he needs to address his defense. It's probably going to be something that's focused on in the summer. But while the defense has its shortfalls now, at least they have a goalie who can step in and fill the void. But before we move on, any last thoughts on the win versus Buffalo? I mean, it was an action-packed event with the fights, with the 3 power play goals, with Petr Kane just deciding he's 25 again and putting up 5 points and having a blast out there. Anything else that you wanted to touch on before we move on?
I'd like to just kind of throw my 2 cents in about Mrazek. I can't help but think about just some of the reactions I saw when that trade got announced. It's very clear that Petr Mrazek was a bit of a polarizing player during his first stint with the Red Wings. Got a lot of guys, a lot of people that are excited. I mean, even just to see a familiar face. Oh my gosh, Mrazek's back. We talked about it on last week's episode. Evan had in his wedding picture. He's wearing a Mrazek jersey. Like that's crazy. And then, right? Like, and then on the other end, you got people who were like furious that they brought him back. A lot of talk about his attitude and whatnot. And to some extent, I get it. I still remember who Petr Mrazek was all those years ago, but I think about that, and then I kind of contrast it to, and I know this is a wildly different circumstance, mind you, but it makes me think of when the team brought Chris Osgood back in 2006 after he had been gone for a few years. Now, they kind of kicked him off because they brought in Dominik Hasek, and they kicked off Petr Mrazek because they decided to keep Jimmy Howard and kind of invest in really basically begin their rebuild. But the reception for Chris Osgood coming back was a lot better than Petr Mrazek coming back. And obviously Chris Osgood won the Red Wings the Stanley Cup, so that'll definitely make you feel better about a guy. But I can't help but wonder how things will change if Mrazek is the catalyst to a playoff run for the Red Wings this year. Boy, would that be crazy. And then just to kind of close out the topic, you mentioned just technically speaking what Mrazek brings to the crease. I also think that he brings a certain moxie that is nice to have back there, honestly. You kind of so it's another weird comparison. I'm full of them today, I guess. But in football, you kind of like when your top receiver is a little bit of a diva because they want the ball all the time. They're never content with how many catches they're getting. You kind of like your goalie to be that guy who wants to play every single game and is confident every single time he's in the crease, whether he deserves to be or not. And Petr Mrazek's that kind of guy. And it sure seems like he, for the most part, hasn't really changed. He's obviously much more mature. I mean, it's been darn near 10 years at this point. Of course he's more mature, but I aside from his jersey number, I know why he's wearing it. I'm very excited to see Petr Mrazek back in his crease. I think he brings some things that Cam Talbot and Alex Lyon don't. And I also think, for what it's worth, that he's going to be someone that people are going to want to cheer for. He was drafted by this team. He was, like you said, Tony, the Red Wings goalie of the future at one point in time. I mentioned it last week. He's the goalie that led the Griffins to their first Calder Cup. This, in my mind, there is no better entry for Petr Mrazek's story right now than to come back to Detroit and end their playoff drought, which began, while he was still with the Red Wings in the first time around. That first game against Buffalo, I think, was quintessential Mrazek too. He did not have a perfect game by any means, but he made the stops that you needed him to make when they needed him to make it. And he had a little bit of flair with some of his saves too. So I'm expecting him to be a little stressful to watch down the stretch here, but also a lot of fun to watch as well.
That entire last summary sums up Chris Osgood perfectly. So you might be onto something with Osgood Mrazek. You did mention the maturity factor, and I think that it's a critical aspect of Detroit's success, because like way back when he was a member of the Red Wings previously, that was a factor as well, but not as a positive. He was he from everything I heard, he knew what was best, and that wasn't always the case. So for him to kind of bounce around Flyers, Hurricanes, Blackhawks, and Maple Leafs as well, work with a bunch of different goalie coaches, get different perspectives, have a better, more mature viewpoint about how to channel that emotion, how to channel that confidence into his play. I think that gives me confidence in Detroit's goaltending situation this year and moving into the future. And if it ends up him being a mentor for Sebastian Cossa for the next couple of years, that'll be great. One confident goalie to another, that seems like a good match. So it was nice to see him make his Red Wings debut and get into the lineup. But one player who hasn't been in the lineup this week is Jonatan Berggren. So nice little segue there. The last member of Detroit's 2018 draft class has been healthy scratched the last 2 games in favor of Dominic Shine. And now I get it. Shine plays with, it's a completely different style, very physical, very engaged. He is the first man in on the forecheck. And Berggren, he's a playmaker. He plays to the outside, super offensive minded. But it does make me wonder what his future is in Detroit. Now, there's a lot to unpack here. Personally, I had bigger expectations for Berggren this year than what we've seen. But there's also a caveat to that of I expected him to be on the power play for the whole season. Marco Kasper took over that role and didn't let go of it, which it's not necessarily Berggren's fault. It's Kasper came in and was just better. And you're not going to take DeBrincat, Raymond, or Tarasenko off the flank in favor of Berggren. So I would say his role has been mostly confined to 5-on-5 play. Yes, he's gotten power play time here and there, but mostly 5-on-5 play, and mostly in the bottom 6, and mostly in a non-defensive shutdown role within the bottom 6. So, I was sitting there watching the game and seeing how things turned out for the Red Wings. Berggren didn't play against Ottawa, and then he wasn't in the lineup against the Sabres, and the Red Wings had an excellent game against the Sabres. And so it had me thinking, well, we're probably going to keep things, exactly the same against Carolina on Friday. So that means Berggren, from my guess, will miss another game. He's a restricted free agent at the end of the season, and he bet on himself this year to, have a good season, just like Joe Veleno did the prior summer, and then parlay that into a larger contract. But, 10 goals, 9 assists, and 61 games now for him. Yeah, I was expecting more. I'm sure he was expecting more. But how do you see things turning out for Berggren? Because based on the roster composition now and looking at next year, and Carter Mazur probably jumping up into an NHL role next year, is he getting squeezed out, or might the Red Wings, move on from Tarasenko in the summer and there's still a spot? There's a lot up in the air with Berggren, and I feel like we'd be hoping he'd be locking down a spot at this point. Am I right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And when I think about Berggren, I think about 2 things. One, I do think about that 2018 draft class that you mentioned there. He's the last remaining piece. In fact, just recently, I actually tweeted their first 4 picks. They had Philip Zadina, who is unfortunately a joke at this point. Joe Veleno, who is now a Chicago Blackhawk. You have Berggren, who is, as we are talking about right now, holding on for dear life. And you have Jared McIsaac, who I think most Red Wings fans have completely forgotten about because he never actually played for the Red Wings. Once upon a time, those 4 picks were heralded as the jump start for the Red Wings rebuild. And here we are now, and Berggren's the only one left. And by the end of by the beginning of next season, he might not even be a Red Wing anymore. I think that's just kind of the reality of this situation. The other thing I think of when I think of Berggren is kind of who he kind of reminds me of in terms of what his role is on this team. He is the Daniel Sprong of this year's Red Wings team. Now, different because Sprong was very much he would go out there and somehow get a breakaway and score, and it'd be awesome. He had like 40 points last season, and it was a constant narrative around him was, why isn't this guy playing more? Every time he's on the ice, he seems to score, and it's because he didn't really do anything else. Berggren's not doing all that, so he's kind of like diet Sprong. And where does that put you? It puts you outside of the lineup indefinitely. Berggren's definitely more of a playmaker, I think, than a scorer. And I guess what I'm getting at here is that Berggren's value is all centered around what he can do in the offensive zone. You aren't putting him on the ice to protect a lead. You aren't putting him on the ice to defend or really forecheck. You are putting him on the ice to push the puck in the right direction and hopefully into the net. And he's not doing that with enough regularity this season. There have been stretches where he's looked really good, and you see that potential that we've kind of seen over the last few years as he's been playing with Grand Rapids, and he had that season a couple years ago in Detroit. All that potential's still there. You see it from time to time, but he doesn't put it together with enough consistency to merit a roster spot on a nightly basis, especially when they go out and acquire a veteran like Craig Smith, who does a lot of really good things. Honestly, I think a lot of attention was on Petr Mrazek for obvious reasons in that trade, but Craig Smith was a very sneaky pickup for the Red Wings. I think he's going to do a lot of good things for that team. And that's, I think, to Berggren's not his deficit, basically, because now he doesn't really have a spot. I think there's still a good player here. I think that Berggren can still play a role in the NHL. I think the days of thinking of him as a future top 6 winger that, puts up 50, 60 points, unfortunately, I think those days are behind us. I don't think he's going to get there. But I still think he could, under the right circumstances, be a really solid depth producer that can hit that 40-point mark from time to time under the right circumstances. The unfortunate part is that it's probably not going to be in with Detroit. They have too many guys coming up, especially over the next couple of years. They all need roster spots. There's some guys on this team that they just aren't going anywhere. And it's just it kind of becomes a numbers game at some point. You got to make room for the new guys, and that's not even considering who they might want to go out and get in free agency and trades and whatnot. And as you kind of start to build out the lineup of what it would look like a year or two from now, you start to go, oh, where would Berggren go? Where would Berggren go? I don't know that he goes anywhere. And unfortunately, I think that's kind of where we are right now. Still love the player. Like I said, I still think he has the goods to be an everyday NHL player. I just think his time in Detroit is, in fact, running out.
Yeah, from my perspective, I really do think it hinges on what the Red Wings end up doing with Vladimir Tarasenko this summer, because, Elliot Friedman originally mentioned it that the Red Wings were looking, and from everything I've heard, they did make an honest effort to find him a new home around the trade deadline, but nothing kind of aligned with their expectations. You can't be paying teams to take players away at this point. But I do think that'll be something that'll be revisited again in the offseason. So at least from my perspective, it's if Tarasenko's in Detroit next season, Berggren may not be. But if Tarasenko's gone, then that gives the Red Wings a slot for an offensive-minded person who can slot into the third or fourth line and play that strictly like 5-on-5, maybe some power play time role, and that'd be okay. I do think looking into the future, if he's still here, if he's on a line with, say, like, I don't know, Nate Danielson and Dmitry Buchelnikov, that's going to be a very balanced line of playmaker and driver and shooter, and that that could actually work out pretty nicely for the Red Wings in the future if we're looking at like a third line down the road. We are getting ahead of ourselves there for sure.
For sure. And for what it's worth too, there is going to be some value in the fact that he's going to be on another cheap contract next season, and the Red Wings are going to need as much flexibility as they can get over the next few years as they start to need to sign guys like Simon Edvinsson to long-term deals and maybe make that big splash in free agency that everyone's kind of hoping that they make over the next year or two. So to have a guy like Berggren locked down on a cheap deal and know that he can provide a little bit of offense down the lineup, there is value in that. And if the Red Wings do retain him beyond this season, I think that would be a big reason why they did it.
It does make you think about, you mentioned it, just value, right? Whether like for prospects in particular, and them maturing from draft picks, to prospects into NHL players or minor league players first, but they're unfortunately, like, one way to look at it is like it's kind of like a stock, right? Their value peaks at some point and then goes down, and it may go up and down, but you want to time the market. And I feel like at this point, the Red Wings might have missed their opportunity with Berggren to, maximize his value and potentially trade him for something of equal value that would be greater than we're seeing now. But that doesn't mean that just because his stock is low, they need to sell. It means, hey, maybe we should build this up a little bit and see what's there, because we missed the opportunity, and we don't want to give him away for nothing or just like let him walk. Or there's a lot there still to work with. He's still pretty young, if all things considered. So just because he is not meeting expectations this season doesn't mean that next season will be the same, and it'll continue to trend down. He could bounce right back up for all we're concerned. But on the topic of prospects, the Red Wings did sign one of their defensive prospects today, Thursday, as we're recording, Anton Johansson, right shot defenseman from Sweden, former 4th round pick. Devin, I'll turn it over to you since you are the prospect guru here. What can Red Wings fan expect from Johansson? He is on an amateur tryout with the Griffins for the rest of the season, and then his ELC kicks in starting in the fall.
Well, Anton Johansson is
a big confusion point in the future. I already know it. They're going to be defensive partners like in 4 years. I'm calling.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. You can't even A Johansson. They're both A Johansson. It's going to be a lot of fun. At least, I guess on the one hand, Anton is much larger than Albert, so at least in that sense, they'll be able to tell them apart. But to that point, Anton Johansson's a big boy, and he's kind of that typical Red Wings big defenseman pick, where yes, he's really big, but he's also surprisingly mobile. He likes to skate with the puck. He's actually pretty agile. He's not afraid to use his size. A couple of years ago at the World Juniors, a lot of people were kind of taking note of him just throwing his body around, making hits and being physical. And if nothing else, that's a way forward for him. I think that the Red Wings could use a big defender that isn't afraid to throw his body around. The Red Wings don't get me wrong, they have that. They have that right now with Ben Sherratt. They have that with Moritz Seider. But if you can have a guy lower on the depth chart to maybe ease some of that physical burden on a Seider, that would be certainly welcome. But Johansson's not just a big dude that hits people. He is actually a very capable puck mover, not just in terms of skating with it, but with his stick, he moves the puck pretty well. When I watch him, he kind of there's some shades of Antti Tuomisto, their 2nd round pick from 2019, another big dude that skates fairly well. Antti Tuomisto has a cannon of a shot. That's a little bit of a difference between those two, but just in terms of there being kind of some raw offensive potential there that they maybe need to refine over a few years, and he has a physical build that screams NHL. And Anton Johansson's also Swedish, and Lord knows the Red Wings love their Swedish talent, so he's going to fit right in. I think that Johansson's going to be another one of those project players. You mentioned his ELC kicks in next season. I imagine he's going to ride out all 3 years of those before we're even seriously talking about him being a Red Wing. We all know the Red Wings are very patient with their prospects. They're even more patient with their prospects that are picked outside of the first round. So that is Johansson. He's a player that I have ranked and then unranked in my prospect rankings. I kind of go back and forth on him because there are some times where I look at him and I think he could be a middle pairing defenseman. He's got enough tools where you can see it. And then there's other times where, especially when you kind of think about all the other defensemen in the Red Wings pool, you kind of wonder, is there a way for this guy to break out and make a name for himself when you've got all these other guys that are going to be challenging him directly for playing time? I do think that he's going to be a beneficiary of the Red Wings development strategy, basically. And I think that he's going to be somebody that will probably get a lot of eyeballs on him in his first season in Grand Rapids. People are going to be very excited about his size. He's going to have his moments where he does some really awesome things, makes some plays that get you really excited. But then he's going to have his moments where you go, okay, yeah, this guy definitely still needs some work. He's very clearly still a prospect. And then, by the end of his second season in Grand Rapids, maybe we're starting to get excited about what his NHL potential is. But I guess what I'm getting at here is the ELC is very much a positive step. It always is. It shows that the organization is very excited about his potential and his future with the organization. But it also is just the first step. Jansson's got a long way to go. He's going to be entering or joining a team in Grand Rapids that has championship expectations. I think that's going to be very good for him. And over the next couple of years, I imagine he's going to slowly work his way up the depth chart until the point where we are excited for that Johansson pairing in Detroit.
Well, Grand Rapids might be an absolute wagon next year. Like, on top of having an already, solid enough season this year, I would expect, Michael Brown-Nygaard to join the team. Emmett Finney's going to be joining the team. Johansson, as you mentioned, and I know Red Wings fans would prefer to have him in Detroit, but I wouldn't be surprised if Axel Sandin-Pellikka spent a good amount of time in Grand Rapids next year too, just to acclimate himself. Hopefully he's in Detroit, sooner rather than later. But this could be a really good team. And even, Trey Augustine could turn pro after his season ends. So, I mean, there's a lot of talent coming through the Red Wings pipeline. And if we're focusing on just Johansson for the moment, on the right side, the Red Wings have Seider, Sandin-Pellikka, Johansson, Tuomisto. There's some talent there. So, while the current team, there has been some defensive struggles. I know, people prefer Justin Hall not be, out there. There is a lot of talent coming, and that's why this team this organization really went through this rebuild, is to stock up on just loads and loads of talent to get this team into a better position, to have more depth, and ultimately, turn into a contender with top to bottom talent. So, excited to see what he brings to Grand Rapids, and know it's going to be probably a couple of years before he's challenging for a spot on the Red Wings, but still, you'll love to see that from a 4th round pick, that confidence that, he's going to turn into something, and how he's developed since the Red Wings, drafted him. You'll love to see it.
I feel like this is the year where Steve Yzerman and Chris Draper get their flowers in terms of their drafting record, because a lot's been made of their first round picks turning out really well. Lucas Raymond, Moritz Seider, Simon Edvinsson, you get it. But it's kind of been, all right, can they find guys outside of the first round? This is the season that Albert Johansson proved he can play. This is the year that Elmer Soderblom seems to be finally breaking out. Now you've got the other Johansson earning his ELC. And there's other guys in Grand Rapids that were picked outside the first round that are making a name themselves. Carter Mazur made his NHL debut, even though it was only a minute. But these are all guys that were drafted out of the first round. And you said it once, you said it a million times. In order to have a successful rebuild, you have to be able to hit on your picks outside of the first round. Now, those picks typically take time, and boy, are we seeing that to be true. But we are starting to see it be true. These players are starting to emerge, and it's only a matter of time before they have more good prospects and NHL ready players than they know what to do with, and that's when things get really fun.
For sure. All right, so I think honestly, you and I could go on talking about prospects all night, but do want to save Evan some time with the editing here. But that's been episode 26 of the Flying Octopus podcast. Wish we had Evan with us tonight. He had to attend to a family matter, but we'll have him back next week. And until then, I'm Tony. This has been Devin, and let's go Red Wings.
Thanks for listening to the Flying Octopus podcast. Follow us on YouTube at the Flying Octopus channel and Twitter at Flying Octopod.